Welcome to Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. We're back for Washington Wednesday, where we break down the headlines from Capitol Hill and explain how they relate to you in Georgia. I'm Tia Mitchell, and today we're talking about an astonishing act of oratorical endurance. Yes, we're going to talk about U.S. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, who shattered a decades-old record for the longest Senate speech ever. And throughout that 25-hour-plus affair, with no bathroom breaks, and he had to remain on his feet the entire time, Booker was clear about who inspired him. It wasn't simply outrage over President Donald Trump's agenda, although that is what powered his speech. But he also referenced a lot the relationship and the reverence he had for late Congressman John Lewis, the civil rights icon and former resident of Georgia.
The power of the people is greater than the people in power. It is time to heed the words of the man I began this whole thing with, John Lewis. He said for us to go out and cause some good trouble, necessary trouble, to redeem the soul of our nation. I want you to redeem the dream. Let's be bold in America with a vision that inspires, with hope that starts with the people of the United States of America. That's how this country started. We, the people. This is a moral moment. It's not left or right. It's right or wrong. Let's get in good trouble. My friend, Madam President, I yield the floor.
Here with me today to talk more about Senator Booker's record-breaking speech and the influence of John Lewis on those remarks is Michael Collins, who not only was Congressman Lewis's chief of staff for over 20 years, but he was also like an adopted son to John Lewis, and he now serves on the board of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation. Michael, thanks so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This is an honor.
So, Michael, I want to start with this. I'm assuming you didn't have any advanced knowledge of what Senator Booker was going to do on the Senate floor. So when did you become aware of the John Lewis kind of influence? Did you watch in real time? Did people start reaching out? How did you learn that not only was he speaking for hours and hours, but he was speaking often referencing John Lewis?
Yeah, I had no knowledge of it. I don't think anybody knew except his staff or one understand of what Senator Booker was going to talk about. I think they had prepared hours of information, material, and discussion that he was going to use. And I don't know that anybody had any understanding of it. But what I did know is that, Congressman Lewis's influence and relationship with Cory Booker, Senator Booker, was important to him. It was something important to the both of them. They cherished one another. And so I wasn't surprised to know and think and hear that he was going to reference many parts of that relationship and the work that he was privileged to do with Congressman Lewis while he was alive. And so it was just, I think, toward the end that I think we all really were captivated by how much influence was built into his remarks in his speech as he concluded.
So tell me about that relationship. Cory Booker's a senator from New Jersey, and John Lewis is a civil rights icon from the South who served in the U.S. House. So what was that dynamic which you saw up close?
Yeah, well, I had the privilege of serving as Congressman Lewis's chief of staff and floor assistant for 21 years. And that was my greatest honor. And throughout that time, I had the pleasure and the opportunity to work alongside many senators and many members of Congress and alike all over the country, all over the world. Senator Booker was someone who Congressman had met very early on in Senator Booker's career, and that I was not a privy to, but understood. And that was in his early days when he was seeking office locally in New Jersey. And they met first, my understanding is in East Orange at a campaign event or just a discussion around his campaign, again, in those early years. And so that's where it started. And just like many people, when they get an opportunity to connect with Congressman Lewis and are in his presence, someone who they've heard about, read about, learned the tactics and the movements of Congressman Lewis and the civil rights leaders, they felt very strong they really felt like they were in the presence of greatness and something, and wanted to learn and wanted to touch and hear from. And so at that moment, my understanding is that was the beginning of their relationship. And I'm sure throughout the years, in all his roles and accolades, he thought about Congressman Lewis, and he thought about what he encountered in those early days in civil rights. And he talked about that openly. My connection and influence with their relationship came very early in his Senate career, where they had an opportunity to reconnect as Senator Booker was beginning to take office. And Congressman Lewis hosted Senator Booker for breakfast with his mother in his office, in Congressman Lewis's office. And it was the beginning of his career, and it was a moment. It was a statement, and it was a connection that meant so much for both Congressman Lewis and Senator Booker. And again, there's many moments throughout their career that they met and connected and counseled together.
I feel like particularly for Democrats, but even some Republicans, Congressman Lewis, when he was among them in Congress, but even since he passed, which he passed in July 2020,
yes,
but they consider him kind of their moral compass. And I want to ask you, I feel like that came out in Senator Booker's speech a lot, that in a lot of ways John Lewis centered them and helped them keep their eyes and their focus on what's most important. But how did John Lewis take that role? Because that's a lot of pressure. Yeah. I know John Lewis is always going to do the right thing and have us focus on the right thing and keep us honest and keep us genuine. So, how did that play out with what Senator Booker did, but also what are your recollections on how John Lewis felt about having that role?
It was a badge of honor for him. He was so honored that people looked to him. And he would say, I just tried to help. I just tried to do a little good. And that's all he did throughout his life. He never thought about it as any great strategic plan. He didn't have any motive. He didn't have any goals that he wanted to achieve. He really showed up every day just wanting to take care of the less of these. He wanted to take care of people who were left out and left behind. And that's how he led his life. He was a man of moral integrity. I mean, he was true. I think about this all the time because his wife, Mrs. Lillian Lewis, used to say that he was almost prophet-like, and that was that he showed up every day where he had nothing hang over in relationship to feelings. He didn't hate anybody. He used to say, hate is too heavy a burden to bear. I mean, he literally showed up loving everybody. He showed up every day as if it was a brand new day. He wouldn't carry anything over, and he showed up and welcomed what was going to be in front of him. And literally, I had the opportunity to witness it, 21 years, every day, and it was astounding to me. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand it. It took many years for me to really show up and understand who John Lewis was. And, you have to think back that when he got to Congress, he had no agenda. He wanted to serve. He was a servant, and he had no objectives. He had no goals that he wanted to reach that were outside of, again, serving the people and taking care of people who were left out. And so people looked at that. People looked to that moral compass. He wasn't trying to outshine anybody. He wasn't trying to get on any committee to do something that he didn't really want to do, but to prove a point. He just wanted to serve in the simplest way. And people could see that. They could see that this man came to serve. And he wasn't trying to jockey. He wasn't trying to be something he wasn't. And he had already provided leadership.
Right. He had done a lot.
He had done a lot.
Even before coming to Congress.
And so when they called him the conscience of the Congress, it was because of that. It was because they could look to someone that was not their peer per se, that was trying to get on a committee, was trying to do all the hard work that it requires to be a freshman member or just a member in Congress in your districts. And Congressman Lewis led with that morality, and people looked to that. They felt confident in it. They also looked at it as a rescue. They can go to Congressman Lewis and just talk, and he would just listen. And that's hard to do in Washington. It's hard to find your own colleagues that you can trust. And Congressman Lewis provided that for everybody on both sides of the aisle.
I will say you guys the staff, you, people like Miss Brenda, everyone knew they don't play about John Lewis. It was a barrier, not physical.
Yeah.
But I came to understand that was because somebody had to put up boundaries because he would let everybody in. He would give all of his time away. So I realized that you guys often had to create that structure around him because he was so giving of himself. But let's pivot to Cory Booker. So we're watching the speech unfold. And as you said, it caught on. It started going viral. There were live streams on social media. Young people were watching on TikTok. It was on cable and all the things. And then when he broke Strom Thurmond's record for the longest speech on the Senate floor, there were so many, particularly Democratic voters, who said, finally someone gets it. Finally someone is fighting for us and doing something. You mentioned that his staff prepared him with binders of information. So it wasn't just a rambling speech on anything. It was a speech on criticizing Donald Trump's agenda. Why do you think it resonated the way it did?
I think we could just look to Senator Booker's opening remarks. We said, these are not normal times. These are not normal circumstances. And anybody who thinks they are is wrong. I mean, we are facing just very different times, and the emotions are high. And there's just a lot going on every front all the time. And it has been challenging, I think, for people to just try to get their bearings, to try to understand what is really happening. And I think Senator Booker, when he spoke up and spoke out, it was a voice that people could connect with, similar to Congressman Lewis. He spoke up and he spoke out. He spoke truth to power in a way that people could connect. And of course, when he first stood up, people thought, yay, somebody else is speaking up. But when he lasted 25 hours and when he really, really spoke words that people could connect with and identify with, it took for all of these weeks people to finally feel like somebody was speaking for them, that they felt the relief. They felt like, I have now a charge. I feel like I've been empowered. I've been, like everybody else, been surveying, witnessing social media. You see people in social media post pictures of themselves with Senator Booker. He's their hero. Mm-hmm. He's their moment of light right now. And this is what people need. This is what people need in a time where they feel like there's darkness.
Did people start blowing up your phone saying, like, we got John Lewis? It's like he's keeping John Lewis alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But what Congressman Lewis would want and think that there is another generation that is taking the mantle, that is picking it up and leading. And they've been leaders. And this is what we need at this moment in time, is an opportunity to lead, an opportunity to stand up and speak out, as Congressman Lewis did his entire life. And this moment dictates that. And Senator Booker showed that. And people connected with it and still are every day. I mean, I just left my doctor's office and I told my doctor I was going to do this podcast. And I shared with him it was on Cory Booker. If you see him, tell him we said thank you.
Wow. We're getting to the end of our segment, but I want to end by asking you about the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation, and tell me about the work you guys are doing through the foundation to, again, honor their legacy and keep it alive for the next generation of leaders.
Absolutely. I mean, Congressman Lewis didn't talk much about his legacy. And he had only hoped that his work spoke for itself. Just prior to his passing, he wanted to have this opportunity to establish the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation. And when asked, what do you want it to do, what do you want it to say, he said, you have it, Michael. And so we have had the opportunity to now show up in ways that Congressman Lewis and Mrs. Lewis, his lovely wife, Lillian Miles Lewis, did their entire lives and career. So we're continuing the work of Congressman Lewis and Mrs. Lewis. And we're doing that in ways that are unique and genuine to his legacy. We're showing up in ways where youth empowerment, registering high school students to vote through a Bridges program. We're partnering with organizations and institutions of leadership around the country in Congressman Lewis's name and in his legacy and that work. We've established an archives project in which we're going to collect all of the congressmen's works and have them digitized for generations yet to come, to study, to understand who Congressman Lewis and Mrs. Lewis were and the work that they committed themselves to. That's our way of showing up and giving back and teaching the next generation.
And I'll just say, put in my plug, I can't wait. I know it's not an easy endeavor, and I know it's probably a ways off, but the museum, the house, his office. I remember the first time I walked in Congressman Lewis's office, and it was a museum in and of itself. And I've heard you and others talk about his home being such a living memorial to him and his wife and their legacy. So I just pray that one day those things will be accessible to people like me.
Yes, that's our goal.
I can't wait.
People love John Lewis. They love Congressman Lewis, and we want to make sure that, his legacy continues, that his work continues, and that he still continues to inspire people.
Well, again, Michael Collins, you may know him as John Lewis's chief of staff, but again, I know him as John Lewis's adopted son.
Thanks.
And thank you for joining us on Politically Georgia. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, Patricia Murphy joins me